He started as a lonely kid in Pretoria who preferred books to playgrounds and rockets to recess. Nobody expected him to last, least of all the people who beat him, ignored him, or dismissed his ideas as fantasies. But that didn't stop him. It made him sharper. Elon's story isn't a tidy climb from nothing to everything. It's a string of hard, ugly near failures stitched together by a stubborn refusal to let the world stay the way it is. He dropped out of school twice. He nearly died from malaria. He was pushed out of a company he founded. Yet, each setback was also somehow a crude kind of fuel. He started by selling a video game for $500 at age 12. He built a mapping company in a cramped Palo Alto office and sold it for millions. He almost tore apart the payments world with X.com and then watched that dream get swallowed up and reborn as PayPal. He walked away with cash, but it never felt like the point. The point was always the next problem. That next problem was bigger and stranger than most people expected. Private rockets, electric cars, solar roofs, underground tunnels, brain chips, a satellite web to beam the internet down from the sky. Each idea sounded crazier than the one before until he did it. SpaceX launched after 3 spectacular failures. Tesla survived by hours. SolarCity became part of a longer play for control over how energy is produced and stored. He built factories the size of small cities, pushed teams with ruthless intensity, and used his public voice as a weapon and a market maker. Twitter was a toy that became a battleground for influence. He bought it to bend the conversation, rebranded it to resurrect an old dream, then folded it into a much larger plan: AI, payments, identity, a single platform to stitch the world together. This is not a story about a genius who always knew the right answer. It's about a man who kept asking the hard question again and again: what system can be rebuilt? And then refusing to stop until someone did. Some of his bets worked, many nearly destroyed him. Along the way, he made enemies, changed industries, and rewired public itself. But his hunger made him the richest person on earth, and it left a trail of questions about what we should hand to the people who can build the future. Now let's go back to where it begins. A boy who read too much, who learned to fix things because nobody else would, and who, against almost every expectation, decided the stars were his next problem. A little boy, barely 3 years old, standing at the nursery window, staring out as if the world outside was calling to him. That boy was Elon Musk. From the very beginning, he wasn't like other kids. He was born on the morning of June 28, 1971, in Pretoria, South Africa, with a head so large it wobbled. And just like that, the world got a child who was wired for extremes. His parents, May and Errol Musk, married young, and their relationship was intense from the start. Part love story, part chaos. May was a model and nutritionist. Errol, an engineer and property developer. After their honeymoon in Nice, May found out she was pregnant. They joked about naming the boy after the city he was conceived, but eventually went with Elon Reeve, a nod to family roots, and a name worthy of a Martian ruler. From the moment Elon could make noise, he screamed, fought sleep, demanded attention. At nursery school, he would completely zone out. Teachers tried everything to snap him out of it, but it was like he didn't hear them. He would just sit there, lost in a trance, as if his mind had slipped into some distant world. Nothing worked, not even a small surgery. the surgery to remove tissue behind his nose that doctors thought might help him pay attention better. Other kids didn't know what to make of him. He called them names without meaning to be cruel. He missed cues, didn't understand when he had gone too far. Making friends wasn't just hard, it was something he couldn't quite figure out. He wanted connection, but didn't know how to ask for it. That longing showed up in strange ways. Once, after being grounded, he slipped out of the house and walked nearly 2 hours across Pretoria to get to a cousin's birthday party. He couldn't read street signs yet. He was only 5, but he pieced together the route from memory, purely based on what he had seen from the back seat of a car. When his furious mom saw him outside, he didn't argue. He just climbed high into a tree and refused to come down. That stubbornness would follow him forever. Even as a little boy, Elon was relentless when he wanted something. When he wanted a Yamaha 50cc motorcycle, he camped beside his father's chair night after night until Errol finally gave in, buying bikes for both Elon and Kimball, his younger brother. By then, Elon was already building things: rockets, explosives, whatever caught his attention. Little did he know, one day he would be launching real rockets into orbit. The house became his lab. And school wasn't kind to him. He was always the smallest, the odd one out. His way of speaking, his bluntness, the way he drifted off into thought, it made him a target. Bullies didn't just tease him, they beat him. Once, after a minor argument with another boy, a group of kids ambushed him during lunch. They kicked him in the head, threw him down the stairs, then sat on him and kept hitting. His brothers saw the whole thing, helpless to stop it. Elon's face swelled up so badly he couldn't even open his eyes. The physical pain was awful, but it wasn't the worst part. When he got home, instead of comfort, he got yelled at for an hour. His father didn't even take his side. In fact, he defended the bullies. In that house, pain was just the beginning. Elon learned to bury his emotions deep where no one could reach them. And yet, he kept pushing forward. But just as he was pushing forward, everything else around him was starting to fall apart. What happens when the real battle begins at home? Just as Elon was beginning to hold his ground in the outside world, everything inside his world started to unravel. The bullies had backed off, but now the chaos was coming from much closer, right at home. What once felt like background noise between his parents was turning into something permanent. His parents' marriage was falling apart. May moved the kids to Durban and raised them on her own. Money was tight. She worked non-stop, modeling jobs, nutrition lectures, and sometimes had to leave the kids alone. Elon and Kimball would take the train to visit Errol, who would often send them back without clothes, just to spite May. Still, she never broke. Her children learned to be tough because she didn't give them another option. Elon, meanwhile, became a night owl. He would read all night long, books stacked high next to him, then slip into bed just as May woke up. He found power in books, sci-fi, philosophy, engineering manuals. Knowledge became his shield. At 10, he made a decision he would wrestle with for years. He moved in with his father. He rode a train alone overnight to Johannesburg. And when he got there, Errol welcomed him warmly. The house was full of things to spark his curiosity: fancy cars, shelves of encyclopedias, tools, gadgets. Elon was mesmerized. During a trip to America with his father, while most kids were busy exploring theme parks, Elon stood for hours in front of arcade machines. He watched every move, memorized every pattern. Back home, he found a way to play for free by tricking the coin slots. And soon, he had a new dream: building his own games. At 11, he begged for a home computer. Errol didn't take him seriously, so Elon started saving. Eventually, he got a Commodore VIC-20, a basic computer bundled with a 60-hour programming book that most people would take months to finish. Elon powered through it in just 3 days, barely sleeping, just coding. While most kids his age were riding bikes or swapping comic books, Elon, just 12 years old, was holed up with his computer, writing code and building games. He sold one, Blaster, to a magazine for $500. At an age when others were still figuring out their hobbies, he was already a budding entrepreneur. He immersed himself in his father's encyclopedias, memorizing facts that nobody else even cared about. Once, when a cousin casually said, "The moon must be 1.5 million kilometers away," Elon immediately corrected him, "No, it's about 384,000 kilometers, depending on whether it's at apogee or perigee." To his mother and sister, he seemed like a child prodigy. But to his cousins and classmates, he came off as an insufferable nerd. Science fiction became his escape. He fell in love with stories where smart people saved the world, where logic, not luck, won the day. One book about a spacecraft that used ion propulsion completely captured his imagination. Years later, he would explain that engine as if it had been tattooed in his brain. By 17, he knew it was time. South Africa couldn't hold him anymore. He packed his bag, boarded a train, and left. No guarantees, no backup plan. Just a head full of ideas and a heart that had learned, sometimes painfully, how to shut out fear. He was chasing something bigger. But was the world ready for him? The world he dreamed of wasn't the world he lived in, and Elon knew it. South Africa felt too small, too violent, too ordinary. He wanted more, answers no one around him seemed to ask, possibilities that didn't exist where he stood. So he left for Canada. His mother's birthplace made it simpler. On June 11, just shy of his 18th birthday, he boarded a plane with a backpack, a suitcase, and $4,000 in traveler's checks, half from his mother and half reluctantly given by his father. Landing in Montreal, Elon quickly realized survival wasn't going to be easy. Promised help from distant family evaporated the moment he arrived. He found himself in a youth hostel, slipping, clutching his backpack like a shield. Slowly he realized the world here wasn't like Pretoria. It wasn't always out to kill him. Still, he had no home, no plan, just a list of relatives. After dozens of calls, he finally reached a cousin willing to take him in, across the country in Saskatchewan. Elon bought a $100 Greyhound pass and rode the bus 2,700 kilometers west. When he stepped off for lunch at one stop, the bus rolled away. He lost everything except the backpack of books he carried with him. It took weeks to replace the checks. The experience planted a small, stubborn idea. The system was broken. Payments shouldn't be this risky. That seed would later bloom into X.com, now called as PayPal. How? We'll get to that. He worked on a cousin's farm, shoveling grain and sleeping in barns. It wasn't the future he dreamt of, but it was survival. After 6 weeks, he moved again, this time to Vancouver, another 1,500 kilometers away. In Vancouver, he crawled through chemical-filled boiler rooms for $18 an hour, learning that no dream came cheap. Eventually, May and Tosca, his younger sister, joined him in Canada. When it was time for college, he narrowed it down to 2 options: Waterloo and Queens. Waterloo was stronger in engineering, but Queens had what he needed more: people. He needed to feel part of the world he planned to change. At Queens, he threw himself into strategy games and deep conversations about space, energy, and technology. Alongside Kimball, he started reaching out to business leaders for advice, eventually landing an internship at Scotia Bank. There, he pitched bold investment ideas and clashed with traditional thinking, an early hint that the financial world might be too cautious for the kind of future he had in mind. Restless again after 2 years in 1992, Elon transferred to the University of Pennsylvania. There, he juggled studies with new experiences, late night physics labs, and computer projects. He didn't relax. He observed, always calculating, always learning. By 1995, Elon faced another choice: start a PhD in applied physics at Stanford, or jump into the internet boom that was rewriting the world overnight. It wasn't even close. Stanford was the answer because he wanted to learn. But while still at Penn, he had seen the executive of a major telecom company struggle to explain how they would bring yellow pages online. Elon realized they were missing the bigger opportunity, combining business listings with interactive maps, turning information into instant action. He sketched out his idea for a virtual city navigator, not just a project, but his first blueprint for a world where technology erased friction, distance, and inefficiency. It kept circling his mind, and with that, he dropped out of Stanford after just 2 days because it was time to build. But could a broke 20 something, armed with nothing but code and ambition, actually crack open the future? This was never about money for Elon. It was about impact. At Penn, he saw how outdated systems like the Yellow Pages missed the real opportunity. Putting them online, making them interactive, tying to live maps so people could instantly find any business around them. It sounds obvious now. Back then, it was wild. With this idea stuck in the mind, he could last just a couple of days at Stanford. He didn't have time to wait while the internet was taking off. He made one call to Kimball. He was still in Toronto, finishing school. Elon didn't offer a job or a title. He didn't have funding, just an idea. But that was enough. Kimball packed a bag and flew to California. Together, they set up in a tiny office in Palo Alto. It had space for 2 desks and barely enough floor for foldable mattresses. They lived there, showering at the local gym, eating the cheapest meals they could find, coding until they collapsed for their idea. They called it Zip2, which is fast access plus point-to-point navigation. Meanwhile, Elon got temporary access to digital map information for free, just enough to start building. They built a product that worked: a live, clickable map connected to real-time business listings. It was seamless, instant, the kind of thing that felt like magic in the mid-90s. They took buses to pitch investors up on Sand Hill Road. Soon they got their first investor, More Davido Ventures, $3 million investment. But that money came with new rules. A seasoned executive was brought in as CEO. Elon was moved to CTO. At first, he welcomed it. Less distraction, more product time. But it didn't take long to realize the truth. If you weren't the CEO, you weren't really in control. The strategy shifted. Instead of building something for consumers, Zip2 would sell software to big newspapers. Safer route, predictable revenue. It was a win. But to Elon, it wasn't. He hadn't left South Africa, showered at gyms, and coded through the night just to make the yellow pages slightly more efficient. He wanted to rewrite the rules, create something that felt like tomorrow. He pushed to pivot again, this time toward building a consumer facing platform, a platform for everyday users could scale faster, attract more attention, and open the door to bigger markets. To be fair, Elon saw where the internet was heading, but the board wasn't ready to take that leap. They wanted to stick with what was already working. Elon disagreed, loudly, but that wasn't the only friction. At one point, the CEO tried to merge Zip2 with a rival company, a move Elon strongly opposed. He rallied the team against it, and the deal fell through. But so did his authority. He was stripped out of control and pushed out of the room where decisions were made. And in early 1999, Compaq came knocking with an offer $307 million. Just 4 years after building it from nothing, Zip2 was sold. Elon walked away with $22 million. He celebrated by buying a $1 million McLaren F1, the fastest production car in the world at the time. No chauffeur, he planned to drive it himself, never knowing it would later lead him to build a company that would change the future of cars. But before that, could this car also steer him toward his next big venture?
Let's pause for a moment. In today's fast-paced world, success isn't just about working hard. It's about staying ahead, solving complex problems, and delivering real results. Whether you are navigating business challenges, optimizing processes, or driving innovation, having the right skills is what sets you apart. That's where Advanced Innovation Group Pro Excellence, popularly known as AIGPE, comes in. We offer globally recognized certifications designed to elevate your expertise in process improvement, quality management, and business strategy. Our Six Sigma certifications, White Belt, Yellow Belt, Green Belt, and Black Belt empower professionals to master operational excellence. Plus, we provide specialized training in lean methodologies, Minitab analytics, project management, AI, and quality specializations, equipping you with practical skills you can apply immediately. AIGPE certifications are CPD accredited, and we are an authorized training partner of the Project Management Institute. We are also the recertification provider of choice for the Society for Human Resource Management, or SHRM, making our programs a valuable asset for your career growth. Whether you are an individual looking to advance or an organization seeking to upskill teams, AIGPE's courses provide industry-recognized expertise that drives results. And here's the best part. These programs from AIGPE are incredibly affordable. You can gain cutting-edge expertise for less than the cost of your daily coffee. Get started today. Click the link in the description to explore. Now, let's get back to our video.
By the time Elon sold Zip2, he had made more money than most people ever dream of. But there was an idea that had been brewing since his first days in Canada. When he tried to replace a traveler's check and was stunned by how slow and painful the process was, years later, during his internship at Scotiabank, he saw the same inefficiencies, just dressed in suits and spreadsheets. Now, with fresh capital from the Zip2 sale, he circled back to that same question. Why was money still so hard to move? The system was broken, and he was ready to build something bigger. In March 1999, he launched X.com, a bold attempt to build the future of banking online. The name itself was daring. Where others saw something confusing or even shady, Elon saw simplicity, power, and potential. His vision was to create a single platform for everything: checking accounts, credit cards, insurance, investments, money transfers. He poured $12 million of his own money into it. He didn't wait for investors to back him. He bet on himself. To get it started, he brought in Harris Fricker, a finance executive he had met through his Scotia Bank internship. The team at X.com worked with relentless urgency, under the kind of pressure only Elon could create. The launch? Scheduled for Thanksgiving weekend. While others were with their families, Elon was pacing the office, making sure his online bank went live. And when it did, when the first X.com ATM transaction went through, his team watched money spit out like it was magic. But pressure creates cracks. His style, obsessive, demanding, emotionally distant, caused early turmoil. Fricker left. So did much of the original team. Still, Elon kept pushing. With funding from Sequoia Capital and partnerships with Barclays and a Colorado saving bank, X.com became a fully licensed digital bank. Elon was just 28 and already being called the next big thing in Silicon Valley. One of the breakout features was something small but revolutionary: sending money by email. At the time, it didn't seem like a big deal, but eBay sellers, desperate for fast, simple payments, embraced it. That single feature started to change the game. Then came a quiet challenge from just down the hall. Another startup, Confinity, had been building a rival payment system, PayPal. Its founders, Max Levchin and Peter Thiel, were just as driven but more methodical. Soon, both companies, X.com and PayPal, found themselves locked in a brutal battle for users. They were both growing and bleeding money. Elon and Thiel saw what was coming. Only one of them would survive. It made more sense to join forces. The merger talks weren't easy. Elon believed X.com deserved the upper hand. Thiel and Levchin thought otherwise. At one point, on the way to a meeting, Elon offered Thiel a ride in his McLaren F1 and floored it. The car spun out and crashed, just short of disaster. Thiel walked away without a scratch, but with a clear picture of who he was dealing with: a risk taker. By March 2000, the companies merged. X.com became the parent, but PayPal was clearly the stronger brand. And that became the next point of tension. Elon still wanted to build a financial empire under the name X.com. PayPal, in his view, was just one product. But for the users, it was the brand they trusted. Elon pushed to rename the product X PayPal. The rest of the team resisted hard. The company was finally finding its footing, especially with eBay users, and no one wanted to risk that progress. Frustrated, Elon reorganized the company, forcing product and engineering to work side by side. To him, technical execution and design had to move together. It was a playbook he would later use at Tesla, SpaceX, and even Twitter. But the cultural clashes inside X.com were growing louder, especially between Elon and Levchin. Just a few months earlier, in January 2000, Elon had married Justin Wilson, his college sweetheart. It was a brief moment of personal happiness amid the chaos of running a company on the edge of a merger. He left for his long-delayed honeymoon. While Elon was away, the coup began. Levchin and Thiel rallied the leadership team, collected signatures from staff, and met with Sequoia Capital to present their case. They wanted Thiel to return as interim CEO. The board agreed. When Elon was back, he didn't lash out but stepped aside. Publicly, he said the company needed a more experienced leader. Privately, he wrestled with the pain. This was the second time he had been pushed out of a company he founded. But here's where Elon begins to separate from others. He tried to rebuild trust with the very people who had overthrown him. He met with them, Levchin, Thiel, and the rest, and asked, sincerely, why they had pushed him out. Their answer was blunt but clear. The company had to survive. The tone wasn't cruel, just clinical. Elon listened. Years later, long after PayPal's exit headlines had faded, Elon made a move that seemed irrelevant to most. He quietly bought back the domain name X.com. He had no immediate use for it. The world had moved on, but Elon hadn't. It was never just a web address, it was a memory, a promise, a future he still believed in. Why? We'll get to that. Then, just as life finally seemed to pause, it nearly ended. On what was supposed to be his first real vacation in years, Elon contracted a deadly form of malaria. 10 days in intensive care, 5 months to recover. And when it was over, he came away with two firm conclusions. Vacations were risky, and so was going back to South Africa. Around the same time, PayPal had gone public and sold to eBay for $1.5 billion. Elon walked away with roughly $250 million. But for all the success, something still felt unfinished. X.com, the vision that started it all, hadn't become what he imagined. Because while he was trying to disrupt finance, his mind kept drifting somewhere else. Back to the sky, back to the stars, back to the same question he had asked since childhood. What if the next thing he built didn't just change how we lived, but where? After Elon was removed from PayPal, he quickly turned to a dream he had since childhood: building rockets. As a kid in South Africa, he was deeply interested in space. He read science books, memorized facts about planets, and even corrected his cousins when they got the distance to the moon wrong. He didn't just imagine space, he studied it. Now, with money from PayPal and his health improving after a serious illness, those old dreams came back. He decided it was time to try something bold: build rockets from scratch. Not for the government or NASA, but for the future of humanity. Elon had gone to Russia hoping to buy two old rockets for his Mars Oasis mission. A bold plan to send a tiny greenhouse to Mars and reignite public interest in space. He offered $18 million for both, thinking it was a fair deal. But the Russian officials scoffed, saying that was the price for just one, and then bumped it up to $21 million each. When Elon pushed back, they mocked him, asking if he wasn't rich enough. That moment flipped a switch. If no one would sell him a rocket, he decided he would just build one himself. That's when SpaceX was launched in 2002. But that same year, Elon's world collapsed in a way no launch failure could ever match. His first son died at just 10 weeks old from sudden infant death syndrome. For 3 days, Elon stayed by his side in the hospital. For nearly a month, he shut everyone out. Friends flew in to comfort him, but Elon barely spoke. Instead, he coped by locking himself in and playing video games, anything to escape. He refused to talk about it, even with Justin. The grief was too sharp, too private. And when he emerged, he didn't talk. He built. The early days were raw. They named the first rocket Falcon 1, the famous spaceship from Star Wars. They worked out of an airplane garage with no windows, testing rocket engines in McGregor, Texas. Elon wanted every part of the rocket built in-house: actuators, valves, tanks. He demanded absurd timeline, and for that, Elon needed a launch site, Kwajalein Atoll, an old US Army base in the Marshall Islands, 20 hours from California. No paved roads, no proper airstrip, just sand, salt, and isolation. Elon flew his team there by private jet. They built a launch pad from concrete, rigged up caravans for sleeping quarters, and began testing. Their first rocket was wheeled to the pad using planks of plywood. That's how low budget it was. March 2006, Falcon 1 lifted off, and 20 seconds later, caught fire. A tiny fuel line nut had come loose. The rocket spiraled, exploded, and fell into the ocean. Elon watched the screen go black. March 2007, the second rocket launched. This time, the first stage performed, but the second began to tumble. The cause? Fuel slosh. When liquid fuel surged uncontrollably inside the tank during flight, threw off the rocket's balance. They had skipped adding barriers to control it, and it cost them the mission. August 2008, the third attempt carried actual payloads. It launched. Stage 1 separated, but leftover thrust pushed the second stage into the first, and it crashed. 3 rockets, 3 failures, and no money left. Around the same time Elon was fighting to keep SpaceX alive, he had also invested heavily in another risky venture, an electric car company called Tesla. He wasn't the founder, but he quickly became its biggest backer and the public face of the mission. While most of the auto industry laughed at the idea of premium electric vehicles, Elon bet nearly everything on it. Tesla was burning through money fast. SpaceX was burning rockets, and Elon was burning out. They loaded the rocket onto a massive military cargo plane and flew it to the remote launch site. September 28, 2008, the fourth Falcon 1 rose into the sky, and this time, it made it. It became the first privately built rocket to reach Earth orbit. Elon didn't cheer, he just whispered, "We made it." Days later, NASA awarded SpaceX a $1.5 billion contract, and he then changed his computer password to "I love NASA." The island launches nearly broke him, but they also changed the rules of the space game forever. And Elon, he wasn't just a software guy anymore. But as Falcon 1 soared into orbit, something else was crashing fast. In a factory across California, Tesla was losing cash, bleeding talent, and inching towards collapse. Elon had barely pulled one dream back from the edge. Would he be able to save the other one? By the fall of 2008, SpaceX had finally done it. After 3 agonizing failures, the fourth launch of Falcon 1 soared into orbit. And just like that, Elon had accomplished something no one else on Earth had. He had launched a private rocket into space. It should have been a moment of triumph. And it was, but only for a minute. Because while one company had made history, the other was barely hanging on. Tesla was flatlining. And unlike rockets, Elon didn't build the electric car business from the ground up. He found it, or maybe more accurately, it found him. And from the moment he laid his eyes on it, he refused to let go. Electric cars weren't some childhood dream for Elon. Rockets were. But energy? That became an obsession later. Back at Stanford, during his famously short-lived PhD stint, he had been exploring high-density energy storage. It was there that he began to connect the dots. How the world runs not just on ideas, but on power. Real, literal power. Who produces it? Who stores it? Who controls it? So, when J.B. Straubel, this quietly brilliant engineer from Wisconsin, started talking, Elon leaned in. He had once turned a junk Porsche into an electric car and was now focused on high-performance lithium-ion batteries. They had met after one of Elon's Stanford talks, where JB cornered him not to discuss rockets, but electric cars. "There's this prototype," JB said. "It runs on laptop batteries, and it just outran a sports car on the track." Elon didn't blink. He just asked, "Can I drive it?" The car in question was called the T0. a fiberglass, doorless, topless prototype. It didn't look like much, but it drove like a rocket. Elon took one spin, felt the jolt of torque, and grinned like he had seen the future. He offered to fund them. They turned him down, said they didn't want to scale. But before he walked away, they gave him a tip. There are these two guys in Silicon Valley, Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpenning. They have got something similar. You might want to talk to them. And so he did. At the time, Eberhard and Tarpenning were building an electric sports car. They had a sleek design, a solid vision, and the perfect name, Tesla Motors. What they didn't have was money. Elon stepped in with $6.5 million, took the role of chairman, and suddenly this quiet startup had a rocket man at the helm. For a while, it looked like a dream team. Eberhard as CEO, Tarpenning as president, and Elon driving the vision. But dream teams don't always work, especially not when two strong egos are trying to steer the same ship. Elon brought in the capital, the ambition, and the scale. Eberhard had the original blueprint, the early team, and the engineer base. But from the very beginning, the real question wasn't just, can we build this car? It was, who's really in charge? Building the first car, Tesla Roadster, sounded simple enough. Start with the body of a Lotus Elise, a lightweight British sports car. Add a battery pack, make it fast, make it smart, make it electric. On paper, it made sense. In real life, it was crazy. The battery cells were made in Japan, shipped to Thailand for assembly, then sent to England, trucked to the Lotus factory. Eventually, they were bolted onto the Roadster frame before being shipped to California for final assembly. It was a logistical disaster. The car that was supposed to cost $50,000 now had a production cost of nearly $140,000. Tesla was bleeding cash, and Elon was getting impatient. He wasn't CEO, but he was everywhere. He started showing up to design meetings, picking apart every detail. Better seats, bigger doors, carbon fiber panels, touchscreen dashboards, retractable handles. To be fair, he wasn't just meddling. He had a vision. He didn't want to just build a car. He wanted to build a machine that told a story. But every change added complexity. Every improvement added cost. Eberhard tried to push back. Elon pushed harder. It wasn't just design clashes. It was credit, strategy, culture. Eventually, it reached a breaking point. In 2007, with no replacement lined up, Elon fired Eberhard. Over the phone, just like that, the man who started Tesla was out. Eberhard fought back through blogs, interviews, even a defamation lawsuit. But it was over. He was gone. Tarpenning left soon after. Tesla's founders were out. Elon was now running the show, and the show was on fire. By the end of 2008, Tesla was days from collapse. They couldn't make payroll. Elon wired in every dollar he had left. He called in favors. He leaned on everyone. It was a mad sprint against bankruptcy. And on Christmas Eve, it worked. The investors came through. The money hit the account. Tesla survived by hours. But surviving isn't thriving. The Roadster wasn't enough. It was cool, it was fast, but it wasn't practical. What Tesla needed next was a car that could scale, a sedan, something you could park in a suburban driveway. That car became the Model S. Elon didn't just want a car that looked good. He wanted it to feel like magic. Doors that lit up and opened when you approached. A battery placed so low and wide so the car was almost impossible to flip. A screen on the dashboard that acted like a smartphone, constantly updating, constantly evolving. The car was the iPhone of the freeway. Everyone laughed until they didn't. When the Model S launched, it wasn't just good, it was amazing. It won awards, it crushed expectations. Then came the Model X with falcon wing doors and luxury trim. Then the Model 3, finally fulfilling the promise of an affordable EV. And then the Model Y. With every release, Tesla got one step closer to its mission, making sustainable energy not just possible but desirable. The truth is, Elon didn't invent Tesla, but he made it better. And it all started with one man asking, "Can I drive it?" But what if driving or building cars isn't enough? Tesla had made it, barely. The Roadster survived, the Model S stunned. By the time the Model 3 hit the roads, even the skeptics were placing pre-orders. Elon had actually flipped the entire auto industry on its head. But for him, that was just one part of the equation. During a dusty ride in Nevada district in 2004, his cousin casually mentioned wanting to start a business. Elon didn't hesitate. "Get into solar," he said, more command than suggestion. That conversation led to the founding of SolarCity in 2006. But the idea itself had been alive much longer. Back in college, Elon had sketched out a future where energy didn't come from beneath the ground, but from above it. Fossil fuels were just a ticking clock. The only answer was the sun. At first, he let his cousins run the show. He stayed in the background, funding, advising, nudging. But shadows don't suit him for long. By 2016, SolarCity was bleeding cash, sinking fast, and dragging lawsuits in its wake. Everyone told him to let it die. Elon didn't. He merged it into Tesla, absorbing the debt, the backlash, the risk. Because to him, this wasn't a bailout. It was a blueprint. You can't sell electric cars if the grid still runs on coal. To rewrite the system, he had to control every link in the chain, from the rooftop to the road. That's what the SolarCity deal really was, the beginning of Tesla Energy. And if Tesla Energy was about generating power, the gigafactories were about controlling it. He wanted fortresses, vertical integration machines that churned out batteries, cars, solar roofs, and power walls, all under one roof. Gigafactories started rising like monuments. Nevada 2014, Shanghai 2019, Berlin 2020, Austin 2020. Each one a bet, each one a warning. Tesla wasn't just a car company anymore. It was a hardware empire. But that was not it. In his eyes, power without connection was incomplete. So he launched Starlink in 2019, a constellation of thousands of tiny satellites blanketing the Earth, beaming internet to every forgotten corner of the planet. It sounded like science fiction until war broke out in Ukraine in 2022. Russian forces severed communication lines. Entire cities went dark. And within hours, the Ukrainian government tweeted at Elon. Starlink arrived days later. Satellites that were supposed to stream YouTube in the desert were suddenly keeping a country online during war. But while his satellites covered the skies, Elon had his eyes set underground too. The boring company started almost like a joke in late 2016. "Traffic is driving me nuts," he tweeted one day. A few weeks later, he was digging tunnels under Los Angeles. Elon hated inefficiency, hated wasted time, and in cities choking with cars, he saw something ancient: broken infrastructure, unchallenged for decades. He didn't want to actually dig tunnels, but build a new layer of civilization beneath the one already crumbling. To fund it, he sold 20,000 flamethrowers online in 2018 as a gag. They sold out in hours. But while the world laughed at the flamethrowers, Elon's next move wasn't funny at all. Neuralink, launched in 2016. If Tesla was about rewiring the energy grid, Neuralink was about rewiring the human brain. A chip implanted directly into the skull. The goal? Treat neurological disorders, enable mind-machine connection, someday merge man and artificial intelligence. The idea itself was wild, but the execution, even more so. Trials on pigs, monkeys, then humans. Reports of animal deaths stirred outrage. Government investigations followed. Bioethicists warned, but Elon kept walking. Because if you asked him, this wasn't just curiosity, it was defense. The rise of artificial intelligence, he feared, could render humanity irrelevant. So Neuralink wasn't just invention, it was insurance. And beneath it all was the pattern. Every one of Elon's moves, from cars to solar panels to tunnels to brain chips, felt chaotic from the outside. But up close, they were deeply connected. Power, mobility, connection, intelligence. These weren't side projects, they were building blocks. But the gridlock and the silence and the failures of old systems pushed him towards something else. Something faster, something cleaner, something connected. His childhood wasn't full of sunshine and ambition. It was full of isolation, books, and broken things. Maybe that's why, even now, he can't sit still, can't stop fixing. But while Elon reshaped energy, transportation, and even the brain, one domain still stood untouched: the human voice, the conversation, the place where the world fights, jokes, learns, lies, and lives. And he was about to seize it. How? By the time Elon had made history with rockets and electric cars, the world saw him as a visionary, a builder of machines, empires, and the future. But behind the headlines was the boy who once escaped into books and code, long before anyone listened to what he had to say. For him, Twitter had always been more than a platform. It was a tool to speak unfiltered, to experiment in public, and to shape the conversation in real time. He used it every day, while many of Twitter's own executives barely logged in. That, for Elon, was the gap, and maybe the opportunity. In early 2022, Elon quietly started buying shares of Twitter. By the time the public knew, he already owned nearly 10% of the company. Talks of joining the board followed, but Elon rejected the offer once he saw what came in with it: restrictions, silence, and legal clauses. So he escalated. In April, he offered to buy the entire company for $44 billion. The board hesitated. Then they caved. The deal closed in October. But as Elon dug deeper into Twitter's inner workings, what he found alarmed him. Bloated headcounts, murky metrics, and evasive leadership only confirmed his fear. The company was broken, and he may have overpaid. Still, he didn't back down. Within hours, he fired the CEO, the CFO, and the legal team. Floors emptied, emails shut down. He slept on a couch inside the building, surrounded by chaos of his own design. But Elon didn't just want to fix Twitter, he wanted to erase it. He axed the Bluebird logo with no warning. In its place, a single black letter, X. This wasn't a rebrand. It was the rebirth of a dream he had drafted 24 years earlier. X.com, the original blueprint, had once aimed to combine money, messaging, and identity. That idea had been buried. Now, Elon had the pieces to build it again. But he wasn't done. If turning Twitter into X was the rebirth of a decades old dream, then what came next was the upgrade he believed it needed. In March 2023, just months after the takeover, he quietly launched a new company, XAI. On paper, it looked like just another entrant into the booming artificial intelligence race. In reality, it was a piece of something much bigger. Elon didn't just want an AI company, he wanted to build intelligence that could be embedded into everything.